From RFM Studios, this is Radio Free Norfolk. I'm John Harris. All right, we're back again with Radio Free Norfolk, continuing our Artist in Profile series, and I thought of what better guest could I go to than my good friend, Greig Graham. So we are set up in his house for this interview. So thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for dropping by and seeing me.
So where are you from? That's the question we always start from as we kind of unfold these artists for people, because I know lots of people have seen you on stage, but tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I come from the small town of Paris, Ontario, which isn't so small anymore, but trust me, 50 some odd years ago, it was very tiny. It was a population of 2,000. It was a great place to grow up. I mean, a nice, quiet town. Never had to lock your doors, never had to lock your car. Everyone knew each other, which was a blessing and a curse. I mean, you couldn't get away with squat there. There were instances where I would take a back street and be doing something maybe I shouldn't be doing. And before I even got home, my mother had gotten a phone call.
Oh, man.
Cheryl, I saw your boy out front, and you know what he was doing?
That was when it was really small. Like today, it's kind of booming. So,
yeah, it's grown exponentially over the years, and particularly now. And this is part of what's happening to small towns all over the place, St. George and what have you, is that people from larger areas want to go to a quiet community. But there's so many of them that community grows, is not so quiet anymore. And it's these same people that are complaining, well, this isn't what I came here for, when actually they're actually part of the reason why it's like that now. So it's a catch-22, a little hypocritical, but it's still my hometown, and I'm there regularly. I now live out the outskirts of Harley, which I never really saw coming, because coming from a small town, the natural progression is that you go to a small city and then a big city, and you grow and you're. But no, somehow I went backwards and ended up out in the country, and I absolutely adore it.
I love that when I come out here, it's nice and quiet. This is kind of what I'm looking for in the end. So I think you made a smart move. In Paris, this is where you kind of first got the theater bug. So this is like the first time in grade 5 that you got onto the stage, right?
Yeah, I was. The entire school, Queenswort School, that was kindergarten up through grade 6. And I was in grade 5. And everyone in the school was given a task as part of this production. It was a year-long project. You know, the grades 2 and 3 would be painting sets, and the kindergartens would help make little paper flowers to decorate the set with. Everyone had to do something, except for my buddy Billy and I. We were just too cool for school, and we said, no, we're not doing that. So we got called into the principal's office, and the principal said, you boys got to do something. And he looked at me and said, Greg, I've heard you in music class, and the show was Tom Sawyer, the operetta, lots of singing. And he said, they're holding auditions down at the gym right now. I want you to go down there. So I went down there and sang a few songs. And lo and behold, that was Tom Sawyer. So it was a great production, very well attended, thought very highly of. They took a picture of myself and Huck Finn, Dennis McKinnon, and put it above the entrance doors to the gym, and it stayed there for the next 30 years. And I was quite proud of that, because all of a sudden now my kids are going to Queenswort School, and there's a picture of their dad up on the wall, you know. And of course, in being in such a small town, everyone that you started school with, you went through school with, like right on through high school. So the little bit of infamy that I got from that production carried on beyond that. You know, all of a sudden I had a different kind of status amongst, my fellow friends and schoolmates. And that was a pretty cool thing. So you could say I got bitten by it.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't mind the attention. But more so, I just thoroughly enjoyed everything about it. I discovered something about myself that I didn't know was there. So it was a terrific accident to happen into.
after that, you didn't go to theater for quite some time, but then you left high school and then you got a job at a local supermarket.
I did, and I was 17 when that happened. And so I was already working full time at a local grocery store called Calbeck's. Anyone around the Norwich area, or Norfolk area would remember that because Calbeck's had a store in Simcoe and in Port Dover, as well as several locations in Brantford. But it was when they built their Paris store that I got hired in right out of high school. And shortly thereafter, I saw that there was an advertisement for screen tests being done up in Kitchener. And that tweaked my interest. So I went up and did a screen test. But what they came back with was absolutely, we'll take you on as a client, but you'll have to go and get your photos done, a portfolio, and so on. That's going to cost $500. And keep in mind, now we're talking about 1978. $500
Yeah,
was
that's
a whole
quite a
lot
bit
more
of
than
money.
$500.
Yeah.
So I had to walk away from that again. But it did prove to me that, yeah, there's still something in me that says, this is interesting. I want to kind of be a part of it. So that went dormant again. And I mean, life goes on. Uh, Working my jobs, hanging out with my buddies on the weekend, then met a woman, got married, had kids. It was just, you know, a typical small town existence. I lived in Paris until I was 40. So, stayed within my boundaries and never really thought too much about it. Then when I was about 28, I saw that there was auditions for a show in Brantford, and I called up the director. But unfortunately, one of the shows was when I was going to be in Florida, so
Ah.
that was a non-starter. And it happened that the director was George Fowley, who
Oh.
I didn't know, but who later on in this story you're going to find out became quite an influence in my life. But then at the age of 32, there was an audition for the local Paris Performers Theater show. And I was just so on the cusp of, I was sitting on my couch watching TV. There was like 30 minutes left of the final nights of auditions. And I was like standing up going, I'll go. And then I'd sit down going, I'm not going. And I did this back and forth for about 10 minutes. And then I thought, all right, I'll go down and take a look at this. So I went down, I met Digby Sargent, and he asked me, it was a production, Best Christmas Pageant Ever. So a lot of kids were involved in it. So Digby asked me, he says, which one of these kids is yours? And I said, none of them. I'm here to audition. And he perked up a little bit and he says, well, let's go have a talk. So for about 15 minutes, we sat and we talked about the town of Paris. We talked about the Toronto Maple Leafs. We talked about everything but theater. And he said, well, it was nice meeting you. And I said, when do I get to audition? He said, you just did. I got a call 2 days later asking me to take on a role. And that was it. Like everything just started right from there. Next thing I know, I was doing 3 productions a year after year. And I went on for 25 years doing it. And not just theater, but all kinds of other opportunities. I could never wait for that phone to ring to find out what kind of adventure was coming next.
But that kind of launched like a real deep involvement with the Paris theater for you, though, right?
Oh, it was huge. It was huge. I ended up getting leading roles in all 3 of Paris's plays for, year after year. And, even I thought, geez, if I was in the audience, I'd get sick of me. But that made me feel good because it meant that I was doing something right. And of course, I never had any training or anything. I just had a natural look at me kind of attitude, which I think is, it serves an actor well to say, listen, I'm going to do something. Just watch this. And I took to it like a duck to water. I mean, it just seems so natural.
Had the Paris company always been at that little fairgrounds?
No,
So when you went, where were they at?
they were located down on West River Street in an old factory. And they had these support beams left over from the factory that occasionally someone would have to sit behind and look around. I mean, it was not a theater space at all, but that was when they were very young, fledgling. They had to, I'm not even sure if they even had to pay rent there at the time, which was perfect because they were in the stages of we need to make just enough money out of this show in order to mount another show.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they got displaced from there and ended up above the fire hall in downtown Paris, which was not ideal. There was no wheelchair accessibility. Of course, audiences tend to be on, slightly older. And there was like about a 40-step climb to get up there.
Oh wow.
So it wasn't ideal, but it was a way to keep the engine running without shutting everything down. And that only lasted, I believe, a season. And then they moved themselves up to the Paris Fairgrounds, and they've been up there ever since.
Yeah, that's the only when I've performed with them. That's the only place I've ever known. So you've kind of seen them through. You've been with Paris through all of this.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I did Paris for, I believe, about 5 years. And then I was asked to go and audition for a show down in Dundas. And I thought, what, you can move? Like, you're not trapped into one spot. And I went down to Dundas and I got a wonderful role there. It was a dual role and a fascinating play called A Flea in Her Ear. And I all of a sudden met a whole lot more people, different people, talented people, and went, geez, I kind of like this. So that started my traveling career. And, I've played all over Southern Ontario pretty much. There are certain places that I wouldn't go to. I've been offered to go up and work in Guelph, but you have Guelph from where I live is probably an hour and a half journey. And I had to put limits on it saying there's only so far I can go. I'll go to Cambridge, but I won't go to Guelph and Elmira, Laura and such. But then after a few years, I started breaking that rule too. So along came London, St. Thomas, and what have you. And if the desire's there, you can do anything. Because when you put all that travel into effect, like an hour and a half to go to the theater for rehearsals, 2 months of rehearsals, and then another 2 or 3 weeks of shows, it's such a huge commitment. You finish your show, your rehearsal at 10 o'clock. And sometimes there's, the obligatory beer and wings afterwards. Means you're getting yourself home at 1 and getting yourself to bed at 1:30 or 2. And then that alarm clock goes off at 6 and away you go and you do the whole thing again the next day. So it's not for the faint of heart.
So what are some of your favorite shows that you've done?
It's a tough pick because at this point now I've been doing it for over 25 years.
Quite a few shows.
I've done well over 50 shows and most of them leading roles. But there are some that just stick out as either being audience favorites. And I mean, let's face it, we do it for the audience. So when they act, when they gush over something, it means a lot to you. It means we have entertained you. And then there's some that artistically I just hold dear to my heart. One of those is on Golden Pond, which I did down in Theater Tilsonburg. And then I reprised the role a few weeks later down in St. Thomas. And that's where I played Norman Thayer Jr., who, knowing the story, is a professor emeritus, and he's hitting his 85th birthday. And I think I was 50 years old at the time. And that was quite a challenge because, how do you play 85 when you're 50? And I've always been rather energetic, bouncy, if you will. And I thought, okay, I've just got to slow everything down. There can't be any quick movements. And, I developed a certain way of holding my hand or pointing or whatever that might, help with the aging process. But I would literally, during intermission, go do jumping jacks in the green room in order to burn off this energy so that I could come back out and keep the pace. And that is one of the very few times that the people that I know, friends, family, and whatever, said, like, we couldn't see a trace of you in that character.
Mm.
That was, and I took a great compliment out of that, because I mean, it's sometimes a role. It helps if you let your own personality, come through. But
If they're similar, yeah.
in order to do someone that is totally not you means you have to really immerse yourself into that role. And if you're successful, then you can take a lot more pride in saying, like, that was a challenge
Mm.
and I did it.
Hmm.
I'm particularly proud of that. I have been drawn into doing musicals, and I'm not a trained singer. Uh,
I've dodged that bullet so far.
I took great pride after the first time I had to sing on stage. I said, "Okay, people pay to hear me sing." But
So that was a funny thing that happened on the way to the forum, wasn't it?
that was with Ancaster Theater Ancaster, and they do tremendous, tremendous musicals. They do tribute shows and what have you. But every year they take an iconic show, and I can't say enough about those people. They're dancers, they're singers, they're artists. This is something that this show that we did, we had a full orchestra in an orchestra pit.
A full
Uh,
orchestra and community theater show.
yeah, yeah, and I'm not sure whether you could say Ancaster's a totally along the lines of a community theater. They've got lot more going for them, I think, than that.
Well, I can't remember what the theater was. There's a show that my wife took us up to. She knew someone in there. They had the same thing. It was pegged as a community theater show, but we saw Les Mis, but it was done with a full orchestra too. And I must admit, I walked away from that going, how in the world? I mean, so you got to perform with a full orchestra. Like, that's crazy.
Oh no, it was totally wonderful experience, and everyone down there again, can't say enough. They're good people. They've got the backing of the city. A lot of the dancers are great because these are people that started in the local dance school
Yeah.
at age 3. And whereas a lot of communities, they say, okay, well, we've got these kids programs, kids theater camps. Oh, you're 16? Well, we're done.
Hmm.
They don't, down in Ancaster, they've got this whole support group to keep them going, and their youth
Wow.
theater camps and so on. And they give them a chance to keep growing. And so all these people that take all these music lessons throughout their school years and through high school, they come out of there and they've still got access to a venue in order to show those talents.
Yeah,
And
that's amazing.
they're so good at it. With me, I had none of that. They needed an actor, not a singer dancer, but they needed an actor to play Suitless and carry the story through. And when I went to audition, they said, "Well, can you sing?" I said, "No, but I'm an actor, so I can act like I can sing." They said, "Well, can you dance?" And I said, "Well, see above, same thing." They said, and if you're familiar with the story, funny thing happened on the way to the forum. Uh, you've had uh, who is it? Lane. Um,
Suitless.
yeah, Suitless. Uh, the actors that have portrayed Suitless were not singers and dancers either.
No.
They were comedy actors,
Yes.
and somehow when you didn't sing a song totally on key, it was in character, so it didn't really matter. It was a great vehicle for me to spread my vocal pipes and what have you, and I learned a lot. They taught me breathing techniques and what have you in order to really get that voice out. So it was quite an experience. Once again, a fish out of water. But this is how I started into theater in the first place. Is I'm the type of person that doesn't think too hard about something. I just say, I'm going to throw myself in the fire and see if I can work my way out of it. That's kind of been my approach to life in general. So, and I'm glad, because without having that kind of daring do, then I would have missed out on so much.
Well, one of the things that I always found interesting about, in our friendship that you talk about, and this kind of going off what we talked about, but I did want to get into the fact that you also do work at the police school, uh, acting for them. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, once again, this is going back to whenever the phone rings, you never know what's on the other end.
Because and the reason why I want to branch into this, kind of building off what you just talked about, is that you take on crazy projects. Well, I think they're crazy. I mean, I've done some amazing things, but one of the ones is this police college thing. So I wanted to give you the time to talk about this.
Sure, sure. Well, I think it was about 3 years ago. Phone rang, and a friend of mine from down London way. Uh, he was in charge of casting people to go down and do scenario training at the Ontario Police College in Elmer. And basically, the class is anyone that takes law enforcement of any sort, whether it's game wardens or whatever, they have to go in and do at least a 3 month stint down as part of their training. And so at some point near the end of their classes, they have to go through these various scenarios and use what they've been taught and apply it. So they bring in actors in order to portray the situation people. And I got a call from from this gentleman, Jason, and he said, I'm stuck. The person I needed to do this isn't available. And I spoke to Heather, and she said, why don't you call Greg? And so here I am. And I said, it sounds terrific. And what they do is they give you an outline of the situation, but then it's an improv thing, which is basically just go by what you feel at that moment, and react to what's being thrown your way. And this is one of the most fabulous things that I've ever done. Like, uh, it's quite a complex. They have these mock-ups of like a little East Side Mario's, a jewelry store, convenience store, a residence, and also that of an industrial area. And it could be anywhere from having people with shotguns that they're on call because they've heard these shots. Domestic situations. There's one where I trash a motel room, and the police are called and respond to it. And it's great because no two situations ever go the same. I could do that motel situation 4 times in a row, and it's like a box of bits and bytes. You never get the same handful twice, because if I react and the officer comes back and heightens
Yeah.
the situation, then I will go above him, and so on, and the same in reverse. If even though my character is strung out, like he just lost his job and he doesn't know what to do, and how am I going to pay the rent, blah, blah, blah. If a officer comes through quiet with empathy, uses my name and so on, then I naturally feel that as a calming influence, so I will react in that way. But it's some of the situations can be very intense, let's say, and yeah, I get to swear a lot, which is rather nice, because after I'm done, I go, wow. I feel cleansed, like, because I'm not normally the type to yell and swear, but that's part of the job. And it's just such a tremendous experience. I feel very fortunate that it came my way, and I decided to jump into that fire.
You've done a lot of stage work. You've done this kind of improv work. The other thing that people were trying to talk you into getting into, and you finally did, was directing. So what was your first directing project?
Well, that was with Paris Performers Theater, and you're right. People talked to me for about 5 years about directing. I, through my evolution, figured, okay, well, that's the next step. But I didn't want to do that because I wanted to be on stage. But when I finally relented, it's because I found a great script, Robin Hodden's Perfect Wedding.
It's a fantastic play.
When you grab a script If you can sit in a room by yourself, read the script, and laugh out loud, then you know you're onto something. But I was nervous, as everyone is going into their first directing bit, like, can I do this? That I decided to hedge all my bets. First was that I got a script that I would actually have to work very hard in order trying to screw it up to screw it up.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just such a winner.
Well, it's a very popular play. It's very well written, and like kind of like you said, is it's tested, tried and true. So there's not a lot of pitfalls in it, or poor writing and whatnot. It's really a tight, nice, well-rounded play.
Quite right. But now I needed the second part of the equation, which is surround myself with good actors.
Yep.
And by this time, I had, as I told you, I had traveled. I had made friends here, there, and everywhere. And so I was able, I had the advantage of being able to pick up a phone and call people and say, he'd be perfect for this part. And to their credit, everyone to a man said, I'll be there. Yeah, it sounds great. Let's go. So now, once again, even if I went in a wrong direction, the actors would, fix it
Help you out
for me. So yeah, I had safety nets all over the place with this.
It's a good way to start directing.
Yeah. But what I did was, I was, as I said, I've always been energetic, and I've always loved the farces and the pratfalls. And I can't tell you how many times I've during a show had to, do a stunt fall over a piece of furniture or whatever. So I decided, well, I'm directing. I'm going to make these people do it now, and it was terrific. I mean, I was. I was one of the best audience members they'd ever had, because right from the start, I'd say, okay, do this. They do it, and I would just laugh myself silly. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm enjoying this, then, the audience is going to, and I wasn't wrong. It turned out to be a big hit with Paris. Some years later, I went down to Simcoe Theater, and I brought it down there. And that's where I met yourself and Meredith, and which was a blessing. I mean, if that's all I could take away from that, then I'd say job well done.
Well, thank you.
But as it turned out, we caught lightning in a bottle with that one.
That went really well. It's interesting because I had walked away from theater at that point, and I saw my wife do The Odd Couple at Simcoe Little Theater, and I thought, if that's possible here, maybe I'll try it again. And I was shopping around to look for a play, and I saw that you were auditioning, and I went and I got the script and I went, wow, it's a really good script. And then I went and talked to people, and they said, well, Greg's a really good director. And so that's why I decided to come out. And it was like a test drive for me, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do community theater again. I had a really horrible experience. So, yeah. And then I came and did an audition.
Yeah. If I remember right, Meredith came down to audition for it. And she, I mean, of course she was fabulous. I mean, but when she was done, I believe she went home and told you, listen, this looks good. You got to get down there.
Yeah.
And you followed shortly after that. And I mean, I was just absolutely stunned, because I knew the characters. I directed it before, and I knew the characters and kind of what I was looking for. And up until that point, I hadn't seen it. And then you walked in, read a few lines, and I went, that's it. We're there. And as it turned out, there were a couple of people from the first show, Stephanie and Christians being one of them, that, I said, I want to remount this. Will you come? But it turns out that two other people joined the cast later on, which was Rich Dalloway and Megan.
I kind of felt personally when that happened, that's when the lightning in the bottle thing took off.
It really did. It really did. Just for the listeners' sake, they came on later on because
some people drop out or something.
We had people drop out, and one was through artistic differences, and someone else, it was something in their life that changed, and they couldn't do it. So away we went with that group, but if you recall, on our opening weekend, there was a big music festival or Legion, something,
Lions Club,
the Lions Club. That was it.
their show.
And
Yeah,
this was something that was attended and supported greatly by the community, which means that
it always did. From what I remember, it always puts a little dent in Simcoe Little Theater's numbers.
well, it does, and I applaud them for like I mean, I think that's terrific when a community is
It's
that's
so busy.
supportive of such a great cause and a great show. But that was on our opening night, and we played to about a half full house. But then the next two nights, the crowds got much bigger, and then all of a sudden, word got out. And so when we
Sold
came
out.
back the following week, I mean, there was a waiting list. We were sold out,
Yeah.
and and that really was warming. We found out afterwards that we had just set their attendance record for a single show when
Oh
we did that.
yeah.
Yes, so that's how great that lightning in a bottle was, and how great a response and support we got from the community, which I will never forget.
The thing I really liked about that, and the one thing I was really looking for is I had when I did community theater before, you'd have directors who wouldn't direct, or they'd organically direct and basically go there and walk around, or you'd have the dictatorial director where you couldn't have a conversation. And I remember I went home and I told Meredith, I think this is going to really work for me because number one, you gave us direction. Number two, you looked through the script and you found your vision and what you wanted. But then number three, there were a couple points that I said, I don't see it this way. I see it like this. And we could have, after everyone the audition, after the rehearsals, I could come to you and say, Greg, I see it like this. And then you would either say, no, I want it my way, or yeah, I didn't see that before. It was that back and forth so I could try to find your vision and incorporate it into the work that I was doing. Up until that point, I hadn't had that outside of professional theater. I only had that in professional theater. You were the first one that I said, oh, there's talented people in community theater that listen, do the work, and bring something else to the stage. Because a lot of times it was the actor having to do everything and the director just kind of, arranging the furniture. That was the first time in community theater that I saw someone say, no, I have a vision for this and this is how it looks. And I was really impressed by that.
No, absolutely. As I said, I've always made sure that I surround myself with good actors. It makes my job, so much easier. And these are a good actor has things that they can bring to the table that are intangibles, and why would you ignore that? You know, a workshop approach to rehearsals is great. With me, I look through a script and I say, okay, there's about five things in here that I've got a definite vision of, and that's the way it's going to be.
Right.
But everything else is up for discussion.
If I
And
remember it in that show, there was like there was a toilet brush thing that you had like locked down. This is the way it was going to go. There was another scene that was that way, but then there was this one scene where I had to kiss Megan, and it just wasn't working. And you and I had to talk about it, and then all of a sudden it unlocked this thing, which I felt kind of unlocked a second half that we didn't both, no one knew, and then it really just opened it up, and then that show became our show shortly after that, which I thought was because you shifted around some things because you saw things a little differently,
absolutely.
and then it was boom and off it went.
Yeah. The set design that they send with the script, uh, I didn't like the way that the two rooms were, so I switched them. I reversed them. And
Oh yeah,
to me that just it in my mind it just made a whole lot more sense. No, you must enter from the right into the seating area, and then the honeymoon suite, the bedroom, would be to the left. And I remember someone saying, "But the book says." I don't care what the book says.
those are guidelines, anyways.
They are. They really are. But that was just once again a tremendous show. But if I've had enough directors in my life that were dictatorial. If you lead with your left, no, lead with your right, and pick up that prop with your right hand, and then switch it. I don't know many actors that appreciate that kind of thing.
I guess maybe if you were brand new I guess it helps to kind of get you through. If you have a number of performances under your belt, I don't need you to do that. I get that you might want a particular scene a certain way. Sure, I get that. But every movement, every it just reaches a point where you're kind of like, why am I here with my experience? My experience should help. Uh, I firmly believe that my job as an actor is to look at what the director has interpreted and give the director what they interpreted. The director's job is to look at the playwright and direct what the playwright has written. In there, there's a lot of artistic expression that happens all the way through, but it's in the best way it works for me is when the relationship between the director and the actor is a trusting one. Then you get your best option, you get your best potential for lightning in a bottle. If the director always comes and says, I don't trust you to even move across the stage, you got a problem off the get-go.
Absolutely. Absolutely, you do. And having me spent a lot of time on stage prior to directing makes me an actor's director.
Yeah.
You know, I can see uh, through the actor's eyes. I mean, all the shows that I'd be directed in, you know, you'd say, you know, this doesn't feel right. And it's great when you can say to a director, can I try it this way? They say, yeah, sure, go ahead. Now, if you do it that way and the director still says no, well, you've just done the chain of command thing,
Yep.
and that's fine. They have veto power. But you get some directors that you say, "Can I?" And no, no, absolutely no. You're going to do it this way.
This way it
And
is.
what you end up with is a very singular vision of a show from front to back,
Yeah.
and you're missing out on all the meat and texture in there, which you can get by having other people have input into the show. So,
And
like, and once again, you got all that talent. Why would you ignore it?
you have all these all these individuals that come with all this experience, right? And like kind of we talked about earlier is that they see something a little bit different, but then it like sparks you off and say, "Oh, I didn't see that before," right? Or you can add those layers and whatnot. That's where for me the art really is. It's in the yes, it's in the doing what the director says, but it's in the relationship between the director and the actor that really gives the potential and life to that. And again, it's the relationship between the director and the playwright. The actor gets a little better thing because you have a living person. The director's is a little harder because you got to go and find what the intent of the playwright is, keeping true to it. Not necessarily like you said, you flip something in the play. You didn't depart from what the playwright was writing. You just kind of departed from a part of it, but you brought a life to it that I think if the playwright was there, the playwright was like, yeah, that's my play. I like that play.
Absolutely, and interpretations of what it's all about. Have you ever met someone that says, you know, this is the 10th time I've seen this show, you know, and they've seen it 10 times at 10 different venues by 10 different groups? It's never the same thing because everyone has their own take on it.
When we did Waiting for Godot just recently, people in Simcoe said, I've seen this play countless times. I've hated this play every time I've seen it. And then I saw it here. And wow, I loved it. Right. And that's just because the director took a different stance, took a risk, kept true to the content of the play, but interpreted differently. I think that's amazing. When you look at Broadway reprisals, a lot of times it's people casting that new vision. People have asked me a lot to direct, and I kind of push back for the same reasons you push back. But you really, for me, I just want to let you know that for me, that you were the one that brought me back to theater because I was like, if this can happen in community theater, yeah, I'll give it a go. Whereas before I was like, my experience was like, no, they're dictatorial. They don't do the work. So thank you for that. That was good.
Well, fine. And I'm glad you did because you know, I've seen, you know, what you've done ever since, and you needed the public needs to see you, man.
So building off of that, another thing that we had a chance to do is we had a chance to do 12 Angry Men together.
Oh yes,
And that was a great play. And the funny thing is, so Matt likes to tell people what to do right on stage, but at the same point, he'll give you room, give you room to experiment. But the one thing I thought was really crazy about that play was the technical aspect of that round. So he built around so the whole stage
It
revolved.
revolved. Yeah.
And then we had to move it, as well as doing the acting in it and doing all the other pieces. And again, it was another director that I found that I came to trust to say, you know what, you know, wow, these people exist in community theater. Wow, I can do that. I thought you did really well in that play. I know you were directed to do the character in a very specific way, but audiences, like you said, we do this for the audience. The audience always responded well at every end of every time we closed that play down.
Yes.
They were always on their feet, always really responsive to it.
Did you notice that there was almost a deafening silence before the applause started?
It was,
People were, it's almost like they had to catch their breath before they got on their feet.
it was, and that to me was really amazing. When we talked about the reprisal thing, I don't, you know how fond I am of Waddle, but we went to Waddle, and the adjudicator didn't like the interpretation, didn't like a lot of things, right? And the audience members kind of were, you could feel them kind of pushing back, right? And the thing that she basically said was, it wasn't like the movie. And I didn't get a chance to say anything about it, but I always wanted to say something about it. It was not the movie, it was the stage version. And the thing that I found was extraordinary that Matt did is he took that and he made it his own. And then he took the strengths of you as an actor and as me as an actor and all the others as an actor. And he brought his vision and he made it like a true reprisal to say, this is not the movie. This is my version of this play, true to the content. But I thought he did such a good job at doing that.
Well, the strange thing is that when you do a play, there's the play adaptation, and then there's the movie app. The two rarely ever come together.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I found was interesting about 12 Angry Men is the first time we ever went to the festival, right? So you've been to a number of these festivals. Like this is not, you've been to, like Paris has gone to them all the time. Other theaters you've been to go to the Waddle Festival?
Yeah, actually, Paris is kind of new to it. They went in about 5 years ago, but they liked they liked it so much that now it's an annual thing with them. They've caught the bug per se. 2005, Who's Underwear in Caledonia was where I first found Waddle, which is Western Ontario Drama League Festival. And in such a small venue with such a small cast, and I mean, the venue was so small that when you exited a door stage left, you actually walked out an emergency door and were standing in the snow outside the building, waiting for waiting to come back in for your next arrival. So, but we did very well with that. We won best ensemble that year, and I just went, competitive acting. Wow, I think I like this because I mean that's where I come from. I'm not your typical theater guy. I was I played baseball and hockey and worked a hard job and drank beer on the weekends, and I was man's man, har har. But then I found the acting thing, and I didn't have the background for it or anything else. I'm going to try this. Oh, I like this, and I just happen to have natural ability. I'm good at it, and I always felt fortunate that a lot of people would go out for 10, 12 auditions and finally land a small part, and be happy as hell to get that. And I admire those people, but I was on the other end where I was fortunate that people would call me up and say, we're doing a show, we'd like you to be part of it. But with Waddle, there again, it was like, there's my old baseball, hockey, competitive spirit saying, oh, wow, there are trophies available. Let's go get one.
I loved when we were there. I loved when a couple of our cast, we won best on, what did we win? We won best ensemble.
Best ensemble.
I loved the effect that it had on the cast. I was really impressed by that. Then we had a couple of actors who got nominated for things, and I think they actually won a couple of things, didn't they?
Yes. Yeah.
And I was really happy that the way that it made them feel. And then when Terry was given basically the one for best stage management, I was over the moon because we worked our guts out to make sure she got that. The things I'll be honest. The thing that I didn't like about it was the first adjudication felt to me like they are coming here to test drive this play to see if it works for their drinking festival. And I was like, eh. Some of the feedback we got was kind of crappy and I didn't like it. And I think it kind of missed the point. When we were there, the lady who adjudicated us misinterpreted the play, in my opinion, didn't understand that it wasn't the movie. And she tried to say that it was the movie. And because the choices we made weren't like the movie. And I didn't like that. And she said some things that about the actors that I did not like at all. A couple of them. Like I think one was about you, one was about Adam, and one was about another one. And I was like, So I told her off. I told her off a bit, which I don't know if that helped us or hurt us, but that part I didn't like. I loved how people who are newer and got the nod and got an award, how it boosted their ego,
Yes.
how it fed into like it like built them up. I thought that was really nice. And maybe it was we just had a bad adjudicator or something.
Well, going into that, found out that she didn't like the material to begin with. So when you've got one person in charge of judging 5 shows, and she's coming in saying, "I don't like that play," I mean, you
Well,
can only go so far with that,
it was
anyways.
my first time and I fought with her. So, anyways, but
Yeah. Yeah, and if anyone did see that show, I was juror number 10, and I had the big meltdown scene. And I mean, if you recall in rehearsals and during the show, the way I was tossing those chairs and what have you, I think the people around me on stage were scared of which way is it going to go this time.
well, even after that workshop thing we did, people came up to me personally and said, "No, John, no, this was the best interpretation of the show that we ever saw." Like we loved how number 10 melted down. We loved how you held that scene right at the end. It was just it was beautiful. And to me, that it's we talk about it because I guess it fits in the context of this podcast. But to me, the part that I really loved about that show is we took 13 guys with varying different levels of acting experience, and every one of them you saw them grow. The younger guys grew. Matt, I got to build a relationship with him. We had to do, like, for me from a technical aspect, that round was something I'd never done before, and to pull that off, I was like, yeah, okay, that was pretty cool. That's the part that I walked away from that play with. Is this for me? I've done theater for 20 some odd years and I've never done it like that. That was fun. So I want, before we lose the opportunity, I want to talk to you about, you get an interesting phone call to do Brant 1 out here. So can you talk about that?
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah, this was gift wrapped with a bow on it for me. Brant.1 is a news streaming service that is covering Brantford, Brant County, and the surrounding areas, including, Norfolk. We're constantly reporting on the goings on, Simcoe, Delhi's areas as well. But there was a void in Brantford where the news was being pulled back. The resources were being pulled back, and the B reporters and so on. If you take a look at the local radio station, their traffic reports dealing with what's happening on the Skyway Bridge down in Burlington and so on. And granted, there's never a lot of traffic issues in Brantford, but even the Brantford Expositor itself, I mean, they've been a stalwart of news coverage for the area for so many years. But anymore, there's just a whole lot of Toronto Sun packaged in there with a few things about the local happenings. So along comes Brant.1, which is it's very similar to a CP24 station, only instead of telling you what Toronto's weather is like and about the shooting down on Keele Street in Dundas and so on, all Toronto centric, we've developed this for the Brantford, Brant County, and surrounding area. We're reporting on what's happening here.
Nice.
We do 2 shows a day, which go on a loop pattern, but we're very reactive. We've got all kinds of sources within the police department, within the mayor's office, et cetera, et cetera. We can report on a story in the morning, but if there's something that has happened, we can update that for our evening edition. And it's free. It's just Google Brant.1. It'll take you right to us. and you can find out what's happening in your community. So you can almost hear the passion out of me. Like this is sorely needed, and it's a great thing. And it's kind of funny how I got involved because on the May 24th weekend, I was up north with my friends, and I got a text about 4 o'clock in the afternoon from Jason Sulier, uh, who him and his wife, this is their baby. And he says, "Hey, how's it going? Haven't talked to you in a while. Listen, we're doing this thing, and I'd like to talk to you about it." And I said, "Sure, Let, let's get this weekend out of the way, and we'll get together." So we met on a Tuesday evening over a couple of beers, and I'm not sure we talked much about Brant Dog One, but the very next morning, I went into my work and I handed in my notice, and I just said, "This is for me. Like I cannot not do this."
It's kind of one of those things that you kick yourself if you didn't do it.
Absolutely. I mean, it would be instant regret. Now we've got a brand new studio that's in downtown Brantford, the old Eaton's building, which is now a Laurier building, which
Yep.
is being transformed for Laurier students. And as being part of a community, we are working in tandem with Laurier during like schools returning at the end of this month. Their students who are taking journalism classes and what have you will be able to use our studio when we've closed up for the evening
That's
and
cool.
get hands-on experience. We've got an editing room, we got the producers, the cameras, on air, etc. All that will be available to them so that they can take what they learned on the chalkboard during the day and apply it. As well, we have an internship program, and so come the first week of September, our staff is going to multiply because we're going to have Laurier students working with us.
That's awesome. That's
It
the
is.
stuff I'm totally into. That's amazing
But
stuff.
this is it. Like this isn't being done to grow a big business so that we can all cash out and live the rest of our lives in Florida. This is a service that Brantford and the surrounding areas needs, and we feel very fortunate that we can come in and help be part of the solution to this. Now, every single one of us are local people from Brantford, from Bryan County. Me being a Paris guy, um, we all have that same shared sense of community and service to our community. So that's what our driving focus is. But if you take a look at it, our first month, we've only been at it about 10 weeks now, but we've already, after our first month, we went, okay, what's working, what's not. We did a format change and did the tweaks. And, we've got our eye on the ball here. And already our product is much cleaner, much better, much more informative,
Mm-hmm.
and more content than ever before. A mutual friend of ours, Deanna Stevens, uh, her role there has increased dramatically. But Deanna, her nickname is D. She does a segment called Detour. And our listeners, watchers will send in suggestions on where she might go and, find these neat little places that are not well known, such as the escape room. She did a
Yep.
detour to the escape room. Over at Bryant Park, they've got a brilliant splash pad that they just opened up this year, and yet nobody knew about it. They were admitting that we're surrounded by this large community, just like right outside of our front gates, and yet this isn't being utilized much. Well, she was down there, did a detour. She showed how easy it is for a single woman to set up a tent and go camping along the riverside there, and then also covered a segment about the splash pad, and almost instantly, people started arriving in greater numbers. So get the word out. So yeah, as far as Brant One goes, our viewership is increasing. We're getting traction. More people are hearing about us. But by all means, you listeners out there, you tell two people, and they will tell two people, and so on and so on and so on. It's really worth checking out.
One of the things I thought was amazing when this whole thing started up is started recognizing all the names and all the friends that I made through my connections with you and Riker, and like to see Deanna doing this kind of stuff was like that. There's no better job for her that I could think of. Like she's doing fantastic, right?
Oh, she is. She's growing into it. I mean, she was good from the start, but Deanna reminds me of myself in the fling yourself into a situation sort of thing. I got Deanna into doing the police college scenario work myself.
Yeah.
Once again, we were short someone. I made a suggestion to Jason to check her out. And since Deanna lived nearby, we would travel down together. And I remember how nervous she was that first day, not knowing what's going to happen. And of course, when you're doing ad libbing and what have you, that's the whole thing. That's the scare about it is you don't know until you start doing it, until you start speaking. You have no idea what's coming out of your mouth and what's going to happen. And so it's nothing you can really truly prepare for. And oh my God, it wasn't just me. It was the police officers, the trainers down there and whatever that were going, oh my God, like that was great.
Yeah.
And since then she's honed her skills down there and she seems to just pick up on it that quick. So like I said already, if you watch her segments, she also does the community news, what's coming up in the community. And she's just grown right into it.
Well, it's interesting you say that you kind of had to alter the format. I know even with this podcast, at first it was you test drive it, try it out. We tweaked it over the way, and it evolves. I can really see that with yours, with the brand. Like it's going to evolve as you figure out who's there, who the players are, how it rolls out. And I think it's really interesting to watch the evolution of this thing from the beginning, right? And where it goes. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And the main thing is it's a service to Brantford, so make use of it. Part of what we're doing is going around to like the hospitals and waiting rooms, car dealerships, and saying you got CP24 on your channel. Why don't you switch it on over?
Right. So you're doing sales, but you're also doing some on-air stuff.
Yeah. Primarily, I'm there for advertising sales. There's a couple of opportunities available on our channel for advertisements. And so that's primarily what I'm there for. But of course, with my background, I've been doing some slots. We have our anchors that run the show, but we also have our segments and our flip twos and our sports guy and so on. So there's opportunity now, and there will continue to be opportunity to do the on-camera thing. But that's kind of like just the gravy on top of the cheese curds,
Well, it's good to see that you got a gig that you were kind of getting from the last time we talked. You were kind of getting out of the acting thing, and then you weren't quite sure what you were going to do, and then this kind of came along. So
yeah, well, it's not getting out of the acting thing. What I said was after we did 12 Angry Men, I was hanging up my stage clothes. After 25 plus years and all the productions. I mean, I've done the classics, the Shakespeare, a ton of comedies, which I dearly love. And once again, falling over things on stage is a whole lot of fun.
Yeah.
I've done theater in the round. I've done outdoor theater. I've traveled. I just got to the point where I think I'm done with that. It's not necessarily leaving a legacy behind, or for anything that way. It's just, I think I'm ready to put that part aside. But I'm directing Paris's upcoming November show, 5 Alarm. I do film work also with Greg and Steffi and so on. We've
this is the zombie stuff.
Well, it's the zombie stuff, but we've now careened it over. We've got a YouTube series going on, which is called Poppy Seed Place, and it's very much a macabre version of Sesame Street.
Yes, I've seen some. Oh my god!
Not
child friendly. Not child friendly.
Big disclaimer: do not let the kids watch this. But it's very it's funny as hell, and we get together once in a while and shoot a series of these, and then I believe we launch one once a month on YouTube. So check that out. Um, Actually, check it out late at night after a few beers. It's even better. But no, I've still got tremendous outlets and still got a desire to still create and do. It's just very fortunate that now I actually have a professional job within the field that I can do rather than doing things on the side. So
Yeah.
it's all worked out very well for me.
Well, I'm glad that has. I think you've landed somewhere very solid, and the growth potential here is just, again, it's going to be amazing as you guys move forward. So
Yeah, exciting times. Definitely. We're going to grow, and yeah, we'll see. We'll see where it goes. Right now, it's a streaming station. Who knows? Maybe one day it'll be a cable station.
I will be able to say I knew you win. Well, we are out of time. See,
Already?
you told me that you didn't think an hour was going to go by very fast, and just like that, every time we're at I'll have to edit this part out, an hour and 6 minutes.
That sounds about perfect, doesn't it?
Well, thank you for letting me come and interview you. You were on my list of people that I wanted to talk to in this series. So
Okay. Are you done with that beer now, or would you like another?
We should have 6 or 7 more. So.
6 or 7? Oh yeah, it is only 2 o'clock.
It is only 2 o'clock.